you are in a place where it's safe and appropriate for you to do so, please close your eyes and begin to take some long, slow, deep, relaxing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every inhale, you feel more peace and light entering your body and mind. With every exhale, feel like you are able to just let go and drop all tension and anything you do not want. Inhaling light and peace, and exhaling, letting go. We picture ourselves on top of a beautiful mountain in the center of a circular grove of trees. In the center of our circle, a bonfire blazes forth, lighting us and the grove up with a sacred golden light. We recognize that this is the light of perfect love and perfect trust, and it easily and gently burns away everything that is not like itself, leaving us safe and serene. Into this sacred space, we invite and invoke the presence of our Creator. To many of us here, our Creator reveals themselves to be a goddess and a god, a mother and father. Into this sacred space, we also invite our angels, our teachers, and our guides. We ask that they join together with us as we dedicate this time that we spend together to each other and to them. We ask that we be guided and led as we walk upon the way, becoming happier, more peaceful, more gentle, more healthy, more prosperous, and more loving people. Thank you very much, and if it's appropriate for you to do so out loud, you can join me in saying, "Blessed be." A long, long time ago, I was going through what is called a magical retirement. A magical retirement is when you take some time from your daily life and you have a sort of a hermitage where you withdraw from the world and you focus on specific magical operations. If you read that book, The Magick of Opera Malene, that describes a type of magical retirement. So I was working on my magical retirement. My teacher had me doing a bunch of very intensive ritual work, and we were going through the elements in order. And I was supposed to be integrating those elements in turn. And so it was a 5-day process, and I was going through the order of creation: fire, then water, then air, then earth, and then spirit. And she said, keep really good notes. I'll talk to you next week. So I did my thing. Now, the first day, I had that fire operation. I put out all the candles. I was done for the day. And my partner at the time said, there's a fire in your room. And I went, what? And my altar was on fire. Nothing was really destroyed, but there was this, it was like the candle relit itself, and the wax had spilled and the wax was on fire. And I put it out, and there was a little scorch on the tablecloth, but no damage. And I said, that is so weird. I'm absolutely certain that I put that candle out. But then I thought, well, you never know. Maybe I thought I put it out and it just wasn't fully out or something. So then the next day I did my water ritual. And we had this bizarre flooding that happened in my house that day. And it was just awful. I mean, there was just water everywhere. And my partner at the time was a plumber, and he said, there's no reason for this. There's absolutely no reason for this. There's nothing wrong with these pipes. And so he snaked everything out, and everything went back to normal, and we cleaned up the water. There was no water damage. And I thought, oh, goodness, this is really following suit. Again, I'm pretty young, so I was probably maybe my 10th year in the craft or something. So then the next day was the air day. And we had these Santa Ana winds come up. And that's a big deal in Southern California. When the Santa Ana winds come up, they can be really high winds. They're warm temperature winds, and they can cause fires. Well, these were really intense. They were like 50-mile-an-hour winds, and they just came through, and usually they last for several days, but these came through and they lasted for about an hour. And I said, okay, this is crazy. It's following suit, right? So I'm thinking, well, it's possibly just a coincidence, but to me, this is pretty intense. And so I kept doing my thing, and the next day I did the earth ritual, and wouldn't you know, we had an earthquake. And the epicenter was right in our town, which is very unusual. It was a very small earthquake. It was like, maybe 3-ish or high 2s on the Richter scale, which, in surrounding areas, they probably didn't even feel it. But it was pretty intense if you're right on top of it. And that's where the epicenter was. I don't know if it was right below us, but rarely is the epicenter of an earthquake in my neighborhood. I've lived in Southern California my whole life, and usually when we have earthquakes, the epicenter is somewhere else. But the epicenter was here, and it was a very mild earthquake, so there wasn't even any news coverage really to speak of. So I thought, okay, this is scary. What am I going to dematerialize when the spirit day? What's going on? So finally, on the last day, I did my spirit operation, and absolutely nothing happened. There were no phenomena whatsoever. And I wrote everything up in my diary, my magical diary. And when I went to report to my teacher, I was expecting, some whoa, amazing. Wow, that's awesome. And she looked at all of this and she listened to all this and she said, I think you need to do those over again. That was way too much phenomena. You don't need all of that phenomena. Are you doing your purifications? And I was not expecting that response. I was expecting my teacher to say, wow, you're such an amazing magician. Look what you can do. And she was the opposite. She was like, ooh, it's pretty messy. You shouldn't be having all these phenomena. This is too much. I don't think you're purifying enough. I don't think you're focusing enough. We have to redo this. So what I learned was that the phenomenal types of responses from magic, from an adept's point of view, isn't necessarily what we're looking for. Oftentimes, when we have a lot of phenomena, an adept will look at that and say, that something seems off. Whereas I was, wow, look at how powerful I am, right? So it's a real different perspective from the way I was feeling as a budding magician and what my teacher was experiencing, which was, we have to redo this. That really changed my whole perspective on magic that day. More than any of the initiations did. It was just that which really changed my perspective into looking not so much for the phenomena, but for the true results. That if there's a lot of phenomena in the manifestations of our magic, oftentimes that's not a good sign. It's not necessarily a bad sign, but it's not necessarily what we're going for. Sometimes if you do a spell and just crazy whirlwind, puff of smoke manifestations happen, oftentimes what that shows you is that you were so far off the mark that your spell needed to do a huge adjustment. And all those manifestations were simply an indication as to how far off the mark you were. Whereas if you don't have a lot of crazy manifestations, but your goals are met and it just seems like normal, it just seems like it would have happened anyway, like a normal occurrence, just the normal course of events, that's more what we're going for. And I went through a period of depression and disappointment when I realized that, because I always wanted things to be like it was on TV. I always wanted things to be like it was in the movies. I always wanted to wave the wand and have the sparks and have the lightning flashes and the puff of smoke and all of that stuff. And I realized that what I wanted was phenomena rather than successes. I was so focused on the crazy manifestations that I didn't realize that crazy manifestations aren't necessarily a good sign. So as I started really building my craft, I looked at those phenomena as being indications that I needed to tweak things, that I needed to change things, that I needed to fine-tune things so that things happen much more smoothly. And now I'm at a point where I always expect things to happen very sort of gently and very easily and very naturally. Now, there was a time more recently when I was involved in a relationship with a person that wasn't good for me. This person was a con artist, and I was very uncharacteristically victimized by this person. I'm usually not an easy mark when it comes to con people, but this person really knew how to charm me, really knew how to push my buttons. And this person also figured out that I knew magic and that I was part of the craft, which is something that most people don't know because I'm very secretive in my personal life about that. I'm very private about that. But this person was capable of just pulling stuff out of me and wanted to use me for his personal gain, wanted to use me for his personal gain. And I was very happy to do it because I was so hooked. So I was doing some angel magic on this person's behalf. And I was working with Sakiel. Now, Sakiel's omens are very specific in the magical tradition that I work. And unlike a lot of angelic traditions, bees are sacred to Sakiel and Jupiter rather than Mikael and the sun, which is kind of odd, I always thought, but I just kind of went with it because that was the tradition. And what happened was I was at a store, and I came out of the store to get into my car, and there's this huge swarm of bees, scary swarm of bees all around my car, just like around, swarm. And I'm thinking, what do I do? I gotta go. I'm late. And so I just put my jacket over my head and I ran through the swarm into my car and slammed the door. None of the bees got in the car. And I thought, well, I'll just drive away. Well, the bees followed me as I was driving. I'm driving within a swarm, right? And all these people in their cars, like driving next to me, are pointing at me and just saying, look. Well, I get to my destination and I look, and there's this huge hive of bees under my wheel well. They're making a hive under my wheel well. And they don't fly away. And they're very docile under there. And they stayed there for about 5 days. And I finally called a beekeeper. I'm like thinking maybe he can remove them gently. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. So he gets there and I said, oh, thank God you're here. This is driving me crazy. And he said, I got here the second I came up, the whole hive dispersed and flew away. And so I looked under the wheel well, and there were like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 bees in there, just cleaning up the little vestiges of wax that they'd left under my wheel. And then I thought back to my initiation years and years prior to that. And I thought, uh-oh, this is a sign that something's wrong. This is a sign that I really shouldn't be doing this. And sure enough, my eyes started to get opened to what was really going on. And I shut all that stuff down. I got rid of that person out of my life, and I, took care of things. And I got back onto a healthy phase of my life, and no longer was involved with this unhealthy relationship, and also was able to learn how to avoid ever being used by somebody like that again. But my point is that the phenomena weren't a, yay, look at you, you're so wonderful. The phenomena were an indication, ooh, change things right now. Change things right this second. This is bad. right? And it was interesting too, because speaking of phenomena, this is how obvious these omens were. I had all of these docile, beautiful bees that I was driving around with that wanted to just kind of seemed to wanted to stay with me, right? So Sakya was sort of like embracing me. And then this person on the same side of his car, he got his window smashed in and all of his stuff stolen out of his car. And I thought, this is a very clear indication this is not a good relationship. So my point being that when we are going for the phenomenalistic experiences, we sometimes are really off the mark. And in magic, I've found that our goal is to have our manifestations be as if they would have happened anyway. You don't want them to draw attention to themselves. You don't want necessarily that big lightning flash, that big puff of smoke, all of those things. When you get that, very frequently, it's an indication that you're way off, that things need to be changed, that things need to be altered. So this desiring of the crazy manifestations is something that I had to, over time, retrain myself that that's not really what I wanted. I just thought I wanted that. And when I get students that decide that that's what they want, or they're getting a lot of big manifestations, I have to gently remind them that ultimately that's not what we want. We want a nice, gentle, easy flow. We want things to manifest in a way that seems so natural, and that our sphere of influence is just expanding gradually, but strongly and rapidly, but easily and effortlessly, so that we start to have better and bigger manifestations. But they always seem like they would have happened anyway. When you start to have these manifestations that are really odd and crazy, very frequently it's an indication to you that something needs to be changed, that something needs to be drastically changed in your life. So when you start getting those bizarre manifestations, look at them more objectively, and rather than thinking, yay, woohoo, maybe it's not yay, woohoo. Maybe you're off the mark. Maybe something needs to be addressed here. Something important needs to be addressed. One of the things in my first issue with all of that, when I was doing my initiation, my magical retirement, that was discussed with me, with my teacher, was purification. She's like, I don't think you're purifying. I don't think they used to call it banish before you invoke. That was the old magical axiom. Make sure you banish before you invoke. What that means is that you start out with purification. And like in a witch's primer, we have daily spiritual purifications that we do. Some people use the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, but the salt baths, incense, any of that stuff, breathing in the presence of fire, all of those things that we talk about in the first lesson of a witch's primer for spiritual purification. If those things are our first step before we move forward with our spell or our ritual, usually that really helps to make sure that the energy is really pure. Because what are you purifying? You're not purifying negative spiritual energy outside of you. You are purifying your mind of thought forms which are detrimental to your goal. So that's why we want to do that daily spiritual purification, because it purifies our mind. When our mind gets purified, our aura gets purified. When our aura is purified, then we are magnetic to things that are appropriate for us and that are good for us. If we go out there and we especially work magic and our aura has not been purified, then our aura oftentimes has vibrations within it that correspond to those parts of our mind that have not been purified, that have neurotic tendencies, that have a lot of unhealthy desires, that have a lot of things energy-wise that are not to our highest good. And then it does make sense that when we put magic into the equation, that we get earthquakes, that we get, we get Santa Ana winds, that we get fires, that we get the bees, that we get all of that stuff, and it is fun. It is fun to say, whoa, look at what I can do. And everybody goes through a period where they ride on the manifestations of those phenomena, but ultimately that's not what we want. Ultimately, that's not what we want. What we want is very gentle, easy, natural outpouring of the results of our magic. If you get the crazy phenomena, go with it. It's not that you're bad, but just recognize that it's usually an indication to you that something's off, that something needs to be tweaked, that something needs to be fine-tuned, or something needs to be completely abandoned, like in my case with the bees, something needs to completely end. Right? A lot of times you can avoid the drama of all of that by just doing some very clear divination prior to doing your spell. Or if you're working a tarot spell, like I have a new booklet out that's a tarot spell, and it incorporates the divination in with the spell casting. And part of the spell is retooling your spell according to the divination that you are using with the tarot cards. And you keep rethinking and retooling and readjusting your spell until it's just right. And then you go for it. When you do stuff like that, rarely do you get those crazy phenomena. You just get really great results. You just get really successful results. But see, the thing is we're so easily swayed by our own minds that a lot of times we misread our own divinations because we really want what we think we want. And rather than listening to the guidance that we're being given, we think, oh no, it means something else. And we just go for what we think we want. Well, when you do that and you get those weird phenomena, you really do need to listen to that communication. Because if you keep going again and again and again for these goals, and where you're not listening to wisdom, you're not listening to your guidance, and you just keep going for it and going for it and going for it, and then you do get a manifestation that's a problem for you. So listening very clearly to these omens that you get is of paramount importance, especially if you want to avoid negative results from your magic. Because you can get negative results from your magic easily. If you're any good at it, you can manifest. And if your mind isn't clear, if your mind isn't focused, if your aura isn't pure, what you can manifest is not what you want. And you would have been better off not doing any spells at all. There's so many people that get these horrible results with their magic because they're not listening to their guidance. They're not listening to their inner guidance, that they would have been better off just not working magic at all than going for this goal, which was not good for them, and not listening to the signs, trying to point them in a different direction, and then just going for it anyway. And then sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is that your spell manifests in those circumstances. And we've all gone through that, or many of us have gone through that, dealing with the manifestation of our spell, that we should have listened to those promptings from our inner guidance to change course, but we didn't want to because we wanted what we wanted when we wanted it. And by golly, we're going to just keep doing this spell. Well, then you get what you get. And a lot of times that old axiom of be careful what you ask for because you just might get it, well, that goes 9 times with magic. You're going to get it. It's going to happen. And if it's not really that good for you, you're going to have to deal with that. So very often I'll get these people contacting me and saying, how do I reverse this spell? How do I reverse this spell? And my response is sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to let it run its course. You know, it's not like on TV where you can just do a reverse the curse spell and everything just goes back to normal. A lot of times when you set something in motion, you just have to let it run its course. And that's just how it goes. So it's important that we take time and think things through and do it right and listen to the inner guidance. Make sure that we have our divinations done beforehand. Make sure that we have our purifications done beforehand. And make sure that when we get an indication that we're off, that we listen so that we can retool the spell and really go for something that's good for us. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. I so appreciate you. Until next time, blessed be.